I may be overstating my own experience, but like I don't go into a movie to escape. I go to see a miracle happen. Like I want to feel. I look like for guidance, how to live, how to be, and to feel less alone. When you see something you're going through, like in art or in someone else, like in a connection in a relationship, what happens? You feel a little bit safer to say like, "Oh, I'm going through this, and you know what? It's okay. I'm not the only one going through this."
My name is Wes Gibbons, and welcome back to the Tungsten Originals podcast. You just heard part of my conversation with David Gutnik, writer and director of Materna, which won Best Actress and Best Cinematography at Tribeca and makes its online debut this week. We discussed filmmaking as a form of therapy, the hardest parts about directing a feature debut, and his advice for upcoming directors. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Episode 80 of the Tungsten Originals podcast. David, welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
Hey, thanks for having me. It's going. Movie's coming out in 2 days.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, in theaters in New York and LA.
Wow, I did not know I was catching you right before that. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's definitely in the thick of it. But it's good. I'm happy to have, a conversation. Let's geek out. Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the film you're talking about is your most recent film, Materna, which I feel very lucky for getting the chance to see just a couple nights ago. It's an incredible film. It's your directorial debut, and it has had like really a skyrocketing experience and the festival circuit. It went to Tribeca and won Best Actress and Best Cinematography, and you got nominated for Best New Director. And I think it's all very well deserved because I really, really enjoyed the film, and I'm excited to pick your brain about it. I've listened to several of your other interviews, and so I'm excited to really just get into the weeds about the story and the process of making it. But before we dive into Materna, I want to learn a little bit more about how you got started as a filmmaker. I know you were in the Sundance Institute and a Gotham Lab Fellow. So I'm just curious. I also noticed on your IMDb you have a ton of experience as like an editor. So I'm just curious a little bit about like your journey as a filmmaker and how you ended up to this point where you're making this as your directorial debut, which is a very impressive directorial debut, by the way.
Thank you. That's really kind of you to say. I did not grow up in an artistic family. I've always been like really jealous of people who have like whenever I meet somebody who know their like parent or parents are like a filmmaker or a painter or even like not or even just a therapist, just people who grew up with like parents that were like intellectually inclined.
Present.
Always just
Yeah.
oh wow, wonder what that was like. But not to say, whatever. My parents are fine. But yeah. So my family came here from Ukraine. My parents, my sister. So kind of, I guess, traditional new immigrant household. So didn't really encourage venturing into the arts. My sister, however, was a rebel. She was, bad girl, and she wanted to be an actress. She was 7 years older, and so for me, like even though I didn't grow up in an artistic family, that was critical for me because my sister was my hero. I grew up like looking up to her. She took me to see my first films. And I watched. That's pretty much what I did for most of my childhood. Sitting, watching films, going to films, watching them on television. In part because I wanted, to be cool like my sister, and so yeah. So I guess now that I'm really saying it out loud, by virtue of my sister, and by proxy, I did grow up in an artistic household.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so that was really the beginning for me. I also kind of, my parents were very old school, kind of Russian uh, mentality, and having an actress in the house was just not okay.
Right.
So my dad and my sister would fight a lot, and I was always the one kind of pulling them apart. And so I could never really vocalize, say aloud, like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I also didn't know that that's what I wanted to do. I was just a kid. Um, and so, it was always a bit of a forbidden fruit. So that in part also drove my interest and curiosity. And yeah, it didn't really announce or verbalize that even when I started, like in college, I was working at the World Bank in DC, and I started working on a documentary, and that was really my first experience making. Um, I was shooting these interviews and didn't know how to shoot, but I figured out how to shoot because I had to, and
Hmm.
no one at the bank would edit what I shot. So there was somebody there was somebody who I went to college with who taught me how to edit. I was taking like a music editing class. He was in that class, and he taught me how to edit. He started the edit on the project, and then I took over once I learned. Um, and that was really my first foray. And I was sort of like, what am I doing at the World Bank making a movie? And at that time, I had also written a play. Um, and my freshman year roommate was a was was in theater, and he was he wrote plays, he directed.
Hmm.
And we stayed close. And when I wrote the play, he was like, I want to direct this. And so we put it up at the Philly Fringe Festival. And the
Wow.
lead actor, 2 weeks before the show, had a nervous breakdown because his girlfriend had put a restraining order on him. So he moved to
Whoa.
Poland. And so since I was the only one who knew the lines, the director was like, "Hey, you want to just act in this as well?" So I was like, "No," but I also wanted
Absolutely
the
not.
play to get made, to get put up. So then I did that, and that was 13 nights, and really fell in love with the process, being with other actors, and engaging and interacting with an audience. And then, yeah, so from that point on, because I had picked up this skill editing at the World Bank, uh, I was able to turn that into some kind of work uh,
Hmm.
in New York, and uh, eventually went to film school a couple years after. And but then even at film school, I continued editing. Like somehow at some
Hmm.
point, you cut one person's short and it does well, and next
Right.
thing you know, everybody wants you to cut their shorts,
Yeah.
and next thing you know, that's all you're doing, cutting everybody's
Hmm.
shorts, which was its own kind of film school.
Yeah.
And one of the people I had cut a short for uh, ended up making a feature, and so she asked me to cut that feature for her with her, and so that project brought me to the Gotham Labs. That brought me to the Sundance Labs. We ended up the project got into the Sundance Edit Lab, where they
Mm.
take two films, they bring the director and the editor to the Sundance Labs, same time as the director and writer lab, screenwriter labs. Yeah, and so that film ended up going to Sundance and doing well. A movie called Nancy that
Okay. I was wondering if it was Nancy. Gotcha.
yeah, that introduced me to kind of new uh, world of
Hmm.
possible collaborators, and uh, so so really after that experience, I cut a few other features. This movie Braid that played at Tribeca. one other feature called Four.
Mm-hmm.
It had an interesting life. I came on after they tried for Sundance and South by and Tribeca, that whole thing, the Ivy Leagues,
Right.
and they didn't get in. And then I came on, but it ended up having a nice life, and they went to the LA Film Festival where they won Best Ensemble, and Emery Cohen was in it. It was like one of his first.
Hmm.
Had a really um, Naomi King. It had a nice cast, um, and it was sort of like an Altman-esque canvas where you have just this sort of day in the life, intersecting storylines,
Mm-hmm.
and something that's a really kind of made in the edit movie.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and then it ended up getting like a indie spirit nom, and
Hmm.
so really had a nice life for itself, and that was my actually my first feature edit, so that's always special. So yeah, so I'd cut these three films, and then that's when I was like, let's make see if I can put something together here.
Yeah. So when you're editing and working so closely with directors,
Hmm.
like, are you in that moment thinking, I wish I could be in their seat telling the editor what to do, or I wish I could be in the writer's room or something like that? Like, were you
I don't. I mean, I wouldn't put it like that.
Yeah.
I did really love editing, and I still love
Mm-hmm.
editing. It's a very, you know, sacred, special, and privileged space,
Mm-hmm.
to be there on your own, and to be there with the director. I felt like I love that relationship. The trust, the bond, the collaboration. Anybody who's ever made a film knows that when you're done shooting and you're in the edit, you're very vulnerable, very
Yeah.
fragile. You don't know
Yeah.
what's what. Uh, you hate yourself a little bit. you know?
Yeah.
You look at your footage and you're like, "What the hell did I do?"
Yeah.
Like, I just want to crawl into a hole and come out like maybe a year later. Um, and so that's so when you're with a director who's in that headspace, you're more than just an editor. You're a friend. You're a therapist. You're somebody there to hold a hand. Um, So I'm not sitting there and thinking, "Oh, I wish I were you." On the contrary, I'm like, "Damn, it's so hard being you."
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
There's a little bit of safety for an editor. Your ego isn't as much on the line,
Right.
and I think part of why I gravitated to the edit first is because of where I was coming from. Because I had a fear of really like saying, "Oh, I'm a filmmaker," or like, "I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make movies," because that's something I just didn't want to like, because I had memories of my sister and like
Yeah.
the whole where my origin story with that. So it was
Mm-hmm.
still forbidden fruit for me when I was in the edit. you know? So it made sense for me to be there first because I'm just sort of tiptoeing my way in,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Right.
and dancing around the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a great place for me to be and learn. So no, I don't think I was thinking about it that way. That being said, um, I not to be coy, but like I like myself. I think I'm interesting. I think I'm cool. But I don't think I'm that interesting or that cool that I'm the only person I want to spend most of my time with.
That's good.
Um, and when you're editing, you're spending most of your
Yeah.
time in life alone,
Mm-hmm.
in a dark room. And I am a loner at heart as well. I'm social and a loner, but
Hmm.
loner. And so like I feel at home in the edit, but at the same time, I wanted more contact. I wanted to be in dialogue with the other artists, with the cinematographer, with the production designer, with uh, with the writer, with every head of department, everyone in the process. So that's why I wanted to make that transition.
Right.
Still love editing. I
Gotcha.
still would love to, you know, edit people's films if they'll have me.
Gotcha. So after going on this journey of being an editor, along comes Materna, which is the reason I reached out to you, the reason why we're here. So I want to read the log line. Materna is a closely observed psychological portrait of four women whose lives are bound together by an incident on the New York City subway. Like I said at the beginning of this interview, I got to watch it a couple nights ago, and I was really floored by it. Because from what I could tell from the trailer and just like the materials that I had publicly access to, it seemed as if the subway was going to be like more of a deal than it was, and not in a bad way. Like I think that's an interesting way to suck people in, but we come back to the subway as this meeting point for four total strangers who are not related in any way. And as I just said from the logline, they're bound by this one violent incident. But I loved how you intertwined. Hopefully, people can go see it in theaters, so they can,
New York and LA.
experience it. New York and LA, yeah,
And actually, one screening, it's also going to be in Dallas.
great. Well, yeah, we'll put links to all that info in the description so people can figure out how to best see it where they are. I would love to experience this in a theater much rather than my laptop. So if you're in one of those places, I suggest seeing it. But we come back to the subway and we see these four strangers reacting to this event, and then we're introduced to a character, and then we kind of go down the rabbit hole of who that person is and explore maybe 20 to 30 minutes of their life, and we learn about them. I've listened, like I said, I've listened to a lot of your interviews, and you said that this was written from a very vulnerable place. Both you and your co-writers were all in this very vulnerable state. Do you prefer or enjoy working from that state? Because I was also reading your EPK talking about how, and you hinted at it, growing up in your family, the men didn't really talk about emotions. The idea was to just not address it. So do you enjoy tapping into that and exploring that on like this stage, kind of like to the public?
It's an interesting question. I don't know that I would say I enjoy feeling bad. Um,
Yeah, that's fair. That's
but
fair.
but maybe I secretly do. Maybe we all secretly do. But I think obviously pain is a very raw and right place to work from, and has provided great source material for art since its inception.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's a good place to work from, but it never,
Hmm.
I wouldn't say it's something I enjoy.
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
but yeah, I guess you could say this was a particularly vulnerable uh, place of origin for a project.
Well, I think it's similar to like how you were talking about with an editor to a director is often a therapist. I think of like I'm in post production for a short that's like super personal and comes from a very vulnerable state. So and it's a similar thing where it's like it's been hard and in every stage from pre to post, but it's also I think like the most honest way to tell a story. So it feels even more like genuine, and I think the crew rallies behind that, and then hopefully the audience will rally behind that. I just think
Mm-hmm.
people, whether you're a filmmaker or not a filmmaker, I think people can just tell like if it's coming from a really true place, and if that happens to be a very vulnerable state, then that's just the most honest way to tell that
Mm-hmm.
story.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that this takes place in New York. I just spent 6 months living and working in New York, and I am from Mississippi. I'm in my hometown right now.
Mm-hmm.
8,000 people here, so very different. I think there's
Where?
probably in Mississippi. I'm just south of
Yeah,
Memphis,
where in
Tennessee.
Mississippi?
Senatobia.
Mm-hmm.
No one's probably ever heard of that, but yeah, it's just south of, like an hour south of
Cinematopia.
Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah,
That's where you were born and raised?
yeah, I've been here my whole life. Well,
Mm.
except for college and stuff like that. So
It's funny because it's got cine in the word. Like cine, that's like a cinematic cinema.
oh yeah, cinema. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I grew up. I can see from where I'm sitting right now the family-owned movie theater that's across the street
Mm.
from my house that I grew up going to. So
Oh,
um,
so okay, that's interesting. So that
yeah,
obviously that helped.
yeah,
I don't know
totally.
how
And
many
you were
other filmmakers or aspiring there are in your town or where you're from, but obviously it had an effect on you.
I tend to think it's just me, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope there are others. But it's funny you were talking about that. You're jealous of growing up from of other people who grew up in an artistic family. My mom is an art teacher, and my brother and sister are musicians. So,
Oh wow, there
and
you go.
my grandmothers are all like painters and stuff. So
Oh, so cool.
I grew up in an artistic family for sure.
Mine are all science oriented.
Nice. I went to a math and science high school, so I have that in me as well, I guess. But yeah, so I in November to May, I
Mhm.
lived and worked in New York as a COVID PA on Law and Order SVU, so really high profile
Mm,
stuff.
mm, yeah.
But it was
I
interesting.
don't even know
My
what a
sister's,
COVID PA is, but that sounds like
it's
something.
definitely something that you got to be
Hmm.
the first person. I had so many 5 a.m. call times because like they have to check in with me first, and I got to ask them all the questions and take their temperature and stuff.
That's crazy.
It's grunt work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very like working on Law and Order is such a New York way to experience New York, you know.
Hmm.
So, but it was cool. I got to like go to places that I never would have gone, you know,
Hmm.
like the Mets Stadium. Like I got to be there and stuff like that. It was really interesting.
Initiation.
Yeah, exactly. You're like really thrown in head
Hmm.
first, both in the industry and in New York City as a place, in the
Right.
best way, I think. And so, yeah, it was really interesting to feel the energy of the city and, take the subway all the time. I know you're from Brooklyn and have lived there your whole life, so it's second nature, just as me living in my small hometown is second nature, obviously. But have you always been interested in New York as like a backdrop for a story? Because I think this is like such a New York story, even though it's not explicitly making it like, yes, it happens on the New York City subway, obviously, but just thinking about how these characters are so isolated and dealing with their problems very internally. I actually was reading the electronic your EPK, and your co-writer Asal said that when she was talking about the story that she was like the vulnerable part of her life that she was writing from was she was getting over, or I should say, experiencing the grief of the loss of her uncle. And she said that New York City doesn't have time for death. I thought that was really powerful because, you're sitting on the subway, you're not supposed to make eye contact. Everyone's dealing with something, and
Right.
everyone is having the worst day of their lives, or at least it can kind of seem sometimes. So has that been something that you've like paid attention to growing up there, is how everyone's kind of in this public space and it's one of the most densely populated places in the country, yet it can be so isolating?
Yeah. I mean, you said it. You said it more articulately than I could. It's harder for people who are from a place to be able to describe it as well as you just did. But,
Well, thank you.
um, we all clean up nice. Uh,
Right.
but if you're wearing a pair of like X-ray specs where you could like look through and see what someone's actually feeling and uh, the heaviness in their heart and what's going on, uh, it wouldn't look as nice, you know.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so I don't think this is something that's exclusive to New York. I think
Hmm.
it's something exclusive to being a human being. But it is the screws are a little tighter out here
Hmm.
because everybody is always in public spaces and having to share them and on top
Right.
of each other.
Hmm.
Um, so uh, so yeah, and I love the train. A lot of people like from the city don't, especially if you're traveling in rush hour and it could get exhausting. But I'm like whenever I'd be in the train, it's like sort of like my Zen space. Like even if it's like really dense and raw, I'm just like, yeah, you know.
Right.
I love that energy, and I don't think I'm unique in saying like I love to like just take everybody in on the train.
Right.
And even if people aren't looking, they're looking, they're feeling like what's going on. Are you familiar with Wim Wenders,
I don't think so.
German filmmaker? He made a movie called Wings of Desire with Bruno Ganz. They basically an angel who can hear people's thoughts and he
Mm.
like falls in love with a human and is like, all right, I don't want to be an angel anymore. I want to like join the human race so I could be with this person and
Yeah.
talk to her. So there's this shot uh, in the in in the film. It's like a tracking shot on the train, and as you're passing like somebody, a person, you hear their thoughts, and
Mm.
it's the perspective of the angel. The tracking
Hmm.
shot is the angel's POV, and so you pass someone like, oh, I gotta do my laundry, and I don't, I gotta scrap up some change, and then you go to the next person like, my mother did this,
Hmm.
this one cheated on, it's like this one's money problems, this one's suicidal. So it's like I watched that film, full disclosure, like really stoned one night, and I remember that shot. I remember like thinking to myself, like, this is what cinema is. Like,
Right.
this is what it's about, like.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really profound. I'm like, okay, I get it. I get what art is about, what this art
Right.
is about really kind like coming as close as possible to like what it's like to live in somebody else's skin.
Mm.
You can't do
Hmm.
that, right? We're like limited by our bodies and space and time, uh, and what that means and how that generates empathy, like what it's like to really see the world through someone else's eyes.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was like consciously aware of
Hmm.
that reference when I was making the film and conceiving of the film. As a matter of fact, I wasn't. But like that idea of like just being around these other people and like everybody is going through shit. Yeah, that was something that was definitely a part of the vision for the movie and why we did it in the first place.
Well, I think the subway, even in my limited subway rider experience, I think the subway is the perfect place for it because whenever the act happens, and I don't want to spoil anything, but whenever the event happens that connects all these people, you literally like you have to deal with it. It has to be confronted. So like in the same breath that you have to confront this, physical force in the subway when you're in between stations and the train's going and you literally can't leave, the characters have to confront the undertow that we've all just learned about them, like their struggles that they're going through. The subway's like an incubator in a way where it all boils, like it's the perfect place to boil over. If that event happened above ground, everyone can just run away and not address
Sure.
it.
Yeah, everybody's trapped.
Yeah, you're trapped in a way.
Yes, forced to deal with each other and face each other. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's maybe I just went on my own little riff with this film and didn't really answer your question, but like the New Yorkness of this for me is like there is a tension between being totally isolated but also in this very communal existence.
Hmm.
We share, we're all on top of each other, we share these public spaces, we share these trains together, and there is a feeling of like we are a part of a community,
Yeah.
just by virtue of the physical proximity
Right.
and the public nature of transportation and things like that. And coffee shops, we all pass each other, like buildings, apartment buildings. Most people aren't living in houses, so
Hmm.
there is this very communal existence, but at the same time you feel very isolated and alone,
Hmm.
oftentimes, especially when you're in a public space. in a
Right.
cloud. So that tension, I think, when you're saying the thing that's relatable about the New York experience, that's something I guess we naturally, as the three of us who wrote the film together, all grew
Mm-hmm.
up in New York, so
Mm.
that came through. Well, especially because of the structure of the film, because you're moving between uh, these kind of chamber pieces where people are alone in their homes, and then zoom out and they're in a train, and so you're moving between these spaces that are completely, depopulated to heavily populated.
And it also shows how like one seemingly minute, inconsequential decision can have such a domino effect. Like the
Right.
final character that we're introduced to, she's going to take a taxi, and then it's like, I'll just take the train, and then now she's subjected to this experience. I think it's interesting
Mm-hmm.
exploring that
Mm-hmm.
butterfly effect of um, how we're constantly making those like consequential decisions even though we think we're not, like you
Right.
never know what's going to happen. It's really interesting. I'm curious, you had two co-writers, two of the other actresses. There are also multiple editors, multiple DPs.
Mm-hmm.
How did you keep, as the director, the leader of this team, how did you keep a unified vision? Or was part of the thought process that you wanted a modge podge of experiences? Because I think something that's really cool from an audience perspective is like anyone can get something from this film, I think, even if you disagree with the characters, because it explores a lot of political issues in a way. I know that wasn't the original intention, but it just ended up happening by way of
Mm-hmm.
what you were exploring.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like I get something from this. My parents could get something from this. I just think it does have a wide audience because
Mm-hmm.
you're exploring for individuals that are strangers. It's not just about one person having a singular experience. In a lot of ways, it's just about the human condition as a whole. So was that part of the goal to just like
We should do our publicity.
I'm available. I'm free. But did you want to create kind of a mosaic, which is also like, again, New York is the best place to have a mosaic. When the first thing, like whenever I got off the airplane and got to my first subway, the first thing I noticed was like, I've never heard so many languages before,
Mm-hmm.
like it was so cool being surrounded by so many people that I'd never interacted with before. So
Mm-hmm.
New York is, I think, the melting pot of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Was that an intentional choice, or did it just happen that way to create that mosaic?
Well, the multiple writers happened just kind of spontaneously. We were all kind of dealing with our own shit, and
Right.
I had been having conversations with them separately, and so and everything we were dealing with was kind of a variation on the same theme, and so that kind of organically happened. As far as the DPs, since you've seen the film, like each character's vignette, for lack of a better word, was shot kind of slavishly from the perspective of the character
Mm-hmm.
of that main character, and so that had stylistic consequences. So if we're really being true to a point of view and what that's going to look like, it's going to look different because we all have a
Right.
different point of view.
Mm-hmm.
We all made of different stuff, and so like the body of the film uh, had to be an emotional and psychological kind of extension of the
Mm-hmm.
character and her point of view. So, you know, I think you could say that all these DPs are brilliant, and you can't peg them down to like, you can't put them in a box. Each
Mm-hmm.
one of them could have shot the film by themselves, and it would have been, beautiful in its own way and different. But we were just trying to be super rigorous about making sure that each one, the person who shot, was right for that.
Mm.
So
Right.
that the tone and feel and texture would be right, between in that connection between the person who's shooting and the subject, the actor.
Mm-hmm.
So it really came from that, more than anything else, just making sure that the fit was right.
So, whenever you're working with your DPs on these different vignettes, do you have any movies that you're referencing that fit the perspective of this character, or was it purely the source material? Because with Mona's vignette, a film that it reminded me of was Good Time by the Safdie brothers, which is like totally a tonal different film in so many ways, but it's not afraid to get up close. The camera's always moving, and it's like almost always dealing in this kind of framing, you know? And it also takes place in New York. So did you discuss with your DPs like, okay, so for this vignette, you know, let's use this film as a reference, or was it just purely the source material?
Well, I think it was the source material first. We
Right.
started with character, you know, that was everything else was secondary. So subjectivity was like rule number one. And then as far as you know, there was another question that was driving was this question of how do you photograph absence?
Mm,
You know, because each of them are dealing with some kind of invisible force that is weighing on them. You know that they're wrestling with these demons that are kind of physically, literally not there but there. So how do you
right.
capture that emotionally and psychologically in an image? Um, so those questions were central. You know, it's not like so we were starting from in and moving out as opposed to starting. Well, here's some cool stuff we love, and let's. That being said, I'd be lying if I didn't say that like film and film history is like a place that I like to work from and go back to. So yeah, I mean, when we were shooting one of the stories in Kyrgyzstan, my DP and I were just watching Ozu on a loop.
Mm,
I mean, it's interesting that you said the Safdie brothers. I would go further back to John Cassavetes for Mona's story. You know, movies like Opening Night and Woman Under
hmm
the Influence, Husbands. Big fan of Lynn Ramsey's early work, especially Morven Caller. So like that film really kind of, I think for me, personifies and captures something that I've been talking about like using like psychic space, like what
hmm
like you know a character's perspective, and turning that into like narrative, turning that into driving action and tension. Like that's something that Lynn Ramsey, especially in that film, like for me is just like a masterpiece of like we are so in her perspective, we are so in her headspace, and it almost doesn't even matter if there's a plot. I mean, there is a plot,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it's like, where's she gonna take me? Because I am so
Yeah.
close to her thoughts and the way they tick and move, and you know her anxiety, her heartbeat. Everything is moving to that beat, um, and so plot or no plot be damned. Like I'm gonna go with you
hmm
wherever you go. um, yeah, I mean, I think I talked about Ozu for one story, but it's really I think that was a big one. The stillness, the wide shots, um, the slowness.
From the beginning, did you know you wanted to tackle these themes through a story about motherhood? Not that it's only about motherhood, but like, you know, the film's called Materna. We see these characters that are dealing with motherhood in some form or fashion, whether as a daughter or as a mother. Was that early on, or did you stumble upon that later in the writing process?
The mommy issues?
Hmm Yeah.
No, that was early on.
Okay.
That's sort of what brought part of what brought us co-writers together.
Gotcha. And then I'm curious if on set, you know, you of course know as a director that you have to really be thinking on your toes on set, and it's a stressful situation. You know, sun's going down. So there are moments. David Fincher said, like, you know what kind of a director you are when the sun's going down, and you have to get 4 shots. We only have time for 2. You know, when you're backed into a corner, you have to make those decisions. I think those times are where the best stuff is captured, even if it's something that wasn't written. Like if the actor tries something in those scenarios, I often, at least in my experience when it's happened to me, it's better than what I ever could have thought it had been. Did you have any experiences like that on set that were like a eureka moment, or that you had to make a decision that you think had a really positive impact? Because I know, like you, I learned from the other interviews that, and I was wondering when I was watching, like, did they rent out a subway car? Like, how did they do this? I know you ended up stealing that location during a 13-hour overnight with extras, which is incredible. I can only imagine how stressful that was as a director and producer and everybody. But was there a moment on set that you thought, like, we're doing it, we're really, like, this is what I've been working towards this whole time?
I mean, circumstances are always invading.
Yeah.
But as you said, the Fincher, or I don't know, was the Fincher quote about four? You have time for four,
Right.
you get two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had something like that where maybe even exactly that, and it was just like we got two,
Right.
two wides, one from one side and one from the. I mean, really, we only had time for one of those, but like mid shot, we were like, all right, run to the other side of the train. Everybody's
Right.
gonna come. So we all just ran to the other side of the train and just picked it. No calling cut, and just picked it up and all right, let's keep going.
Yeah,
And we
exactly.
get the rest.
Yeah, I love those moments. It's because it's so, like, it's everyone on the crew, I feel like, is operating like all cylinders are firing. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
who cares about the slate? Like, you're kind of throwing those rules out the window. It's like, as long as we're recording what's it needs to be recorded, we'll
Mm-hmm.
figure it out later. And then it's like, when it works, it's such a sigh of relief. Like, yes, we did hit record on that moment. We did capture it. I think it's interesting how this film tackles isolation so much, and we've been talking about New York City a lot. Obviously, this is a very New York story, and I think New York is a great place to explore that isolation, as we've covered. It's almost poetic justice. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but it's almost ironic that you're now in this like distribution process and festival process when we've never been more isolated. Like, obviously with the pandemic, I know people are tired about talking about the pandemic, but has that, like, do you think that's influenced a lot about how people are reacting to the film? Because especially like in New York, I mean, we're talking about the subway a lot. It shut down for the first time in decades for them to clean it overnight. I know that was like that's kind of the signal of like how serious COVID was. Obviously, New York was the epicenter, and my sister was living there, is living there, and she experienced it during the epicenter. So I've heard stories about how terrible that was. But do you think that that is having a big impact on how people are reacting to the film, and maybe how you're reacting to the material, like with this newfound perspective?
This may sound like a dodge, but the truth is, we're really going to be opening up the film to the public, in a couple of days, and more widely in a week from now. So, we were supposed to open Tribeca 2020. That's where we won the awards. So we have been doing, we were in feedback screens constantly prior to then. So we were getting a lot of, there was a feedback loop and a response, knowing how people were reacting to the film. This was before the plague, and then once the pandemic happened, we weren't really showing the film to a lot of people. It was really just festival juries, and then screening virtually. So there's not that much contact with audiences
Right.
when you're screening that way. I have heard enough of a response from people like, "Whoa, like this is what we're going through. Like this is crazy." But it's interesting because we didn't write it. We wrote it before the pandemic,
Yeah.
so I can't like take credit for that.
Right.
I think maybe what I would say is perhaps what it's saying is that we were more isolated than we thought we were. If the feeling could be so similar before and after, before and after. I don't know. I just pulled that one out of my. That thought just hit, like I'm just thinking
that
out
was a good
loud.
thought. Yeah, that's a good soundbite for sure.
I mean, I don't even know if that's true, but like, I guess you can make that case.
I think so. It's put in because we had what was normal, and now that normal has forever changed. So our perspective has forever changed. So I think a lot of people are looking at how they lived their life pre 2020, and
Hmm.
did I like
Hmm.
say I love you enough and stuff like simple like
Hmm.
really basic things like that. It just
Hmm.
totally upended things. Um, I'm curious with your editing experience. You talked about For the feature film that you edited that was really made in the edit. I think of this film as a similar. I haven't seen For, so I don't know how much of a comparison, but it seems similar in where this was made in the edit because you have these intertwining storylines, and we're going back to the subway as like the backbone of it. Do you think your experience as an editor, like, did you feel more prepared going in post production because of that?
100%. I would say, I mean, I don't think you're wrong. I mean, I think, and maybe I shouldn't have put it that way about For. I mean, there are the films like, like a Hitchcock film or like a Fincher film where, every cut is almost pre-designed. Um, and then there's the kind of film where like there's DNA strands.
Yeah.
You have this and this and this, and then we'll figure out how it all works in the edit.
Yeah.
Or like, here's your coverage, you're wide, you're medium, you're close, and then in the end in the edit we'll figure out how all of that comes together. There was more of the the former of like there were shot ideas and a sense of when things would cut, and so that like my editing experience came through there. There was there's always discovery. There better be discovery because you're rewriting your movie in the edit, and if
Yeah.
you're not, then you're doing something wrong.
Mhm.
But I would say especially when it came to the order, that is where something we really had to crack. That was a
Interesting.
Rubik's cube, and the way it was written, it's not in that sense was not the way it shook out in the edit. But as far as within stories, it was very, that edit didn't take very long. Like within
Yeah.
stories, the edit was like a couple weeks.
So throughout this process, I know from one of the interviews of yours that I listened to, it seemed at least that it was kind of a relatively quick process from pre-production to you just immediately went into casting and then started shooting. It was pretty
Mm-hmm.
one thing after the other.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout this whole process, how did you grow as a director?
Wow, I don't know. I hope I grew some. Um,
I think I think every project, like no matter if you're like me and working in the shorts world right out of film school or someone like Fincher or something, like I hope every project makes us grow.
I grew old. I
Yeah.
put on like, I gained a couple of grays. I maybe
Yeah.
lost about 10 years of my life. That's every film.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we got to slow down. We'll
I
be
don't know
living
how
until we're
anyone
30.
makes like, I don't know, 30 films, 20. It's like at some point I would imagine it's like, you start aging in reverse. It's like Benjamin Button. I think what you're really asking is, can you provide any? Not that I am some sage, wise, like I got information for you that really like I mean, who am I? but but if there's anything I can impart, because a lot of your audience is just probably just trying to get their first features made. Yeah.
I know many people trying to do that.
Okay. So just I would say a couple things. One, there's people joke about how like casting is like 99% of the job of a director. It's more than that.
Hmm.
99.99999999999. You can still fuck it up even if you cast right. That's why it's 99.99999 and not 100. you cast wrong, I don't know how you overcome that. But Mike Lee jokes about, somebody asked him, like, directors always can't stand watching their own films. Like, famous directors talk about how painful it is. It's like, yeah, I don't really have that problem. And granted, he's very privileged. He makes movies over the course of like 4 or 5 years with actors separately. They don't have a script. They're coming up with the script together. The actors don't know what the other actors are doing or what their other storyline is, which is to say, when most directors look at their movies, there are regrets. So like,
Right.
I cast this person. You always have regrets,
Right.
because it's impossible to live life without those. But like, that person, that's not the person I wanted for that role. This, was going to trigger financing, and it's just, that's what I made a compromise there. I just really wanted to shoot, and we had to go, so we made this hiring error the day before because I was desperate. There's a joke in, not the joke. There's a line in Mad Men where I forget which season, but basically he's like, a snake when it's starving could eat too much and it'll kill the snake. So like, when we're starving to make our films, when we're desperate, that's when we're at our most dangerous to ourselves. That's when we make, that's when we compromise for the sake of getting it done. Now you could say, well, perfect is the enemy of the good, but then you really got to measure what that compromise is and whether it's a compromise you're willing to live with and whether you're going to be able to live with when you watch it after the fact, which is to say that hiring is everything. You're not gonna listen to me because everybody's got to make their own mistakes. You tell a kid, like, that's hot, don't touch it, and then the baby touches it because it wants to know for itself, and then it's like, so like, everybody's got to go through their no matter what anybody tells them. I think we're tempted to buy our own hype and sip our own Kool-Aid about ourselves when we think we can overcome anything. Like, if you're not the best actor, or if you're not a real actor, or you're not an actor, or you're not, I'll overcome it. My talent will overcome it. My will overcome it. No, it won't. You could be God's greatest gift to humanity and the biggest genius on planet Earth. If you do not have the right team around you, you will still fail. So team beats talent any day of the week. As a sports metaphor, but it applies to everything, whether you're a cast on Broadway, or a crew, or like, I would say, if there's anything I did well on this, it's applying a very rigorous standard to hiring practices. If we weren't in love with our cinematographer, if we weren't in love with our actor, if we weren't in love with the producer, no shooting. No shooting happens until, and so what does it mean to be in love? That it's the most talented person I could find, somebody whose work I'm obsessed with, but also somebody who's absolutely right for this. 1-to-1, shady region. Not a little bit shady, 1-to-1. And again, that goes back to like Y3 cinematographers.
Right.
It was that, it was that level of specificity. And granted, we were working on a micro budget. So we had the luxury and privilege of having that kind of totalitarian control over our choice making. But still, and then as far as the actors go, like, and this is not to say actors are animals. This is not the Hitchcock thing where it's like actors are cattle. No, and I don't think he really believed that anyway. Especially in some films where it was clear that he was in love with his actors. So, like, you cast a goat to play a goat. You don't cast a goat to play a possum.
Yeah.
You cast a possum to play a possum. Yes, we all contain multitudes. Yes, like an actor can really stretch if they're talented and play a lot, but like constitutionally, temperamentally, like the soul of a person, the spirit animal, whatever you connect with in this analogy. Now, I went so far in this as to like actually people are playing themselves. That's like a little further than people are going to go for most of their films. But even with Caitlin Sheil and Lindsay Burge, like Caitlin Sheil contains multitudes and is a lot of different people, but she's not Jean. She's not that person. But like that level of like, you know what I'm talking about? That
I know exactly what you're talking about.
That introvert, like she didn't have to fake that. You know, Lindsay Burge, somebody who has a reputation, you know, like a earned reputation for like being courageous and taking on roles, characters, you know, that aren't necessarily likable in the traditional sense. You know, this is somebody who needed to be that, who's saying things that aren't palatable. So it's got to be there. It's got to be in the bones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can't just be, oh, I love this person, and I got to put them in a film, doesn't matter what it is, and it doesn't matter if the character fits. Because when we're starting out, there is that. It's like, oh, this is just we'll put you in it and it'll work.
Yeah.
Man, you got to check. It's got to check all the boxes, and you got to really be rigorous. You can't be willy-nilly about this. It seems self-evident, but it isn't. You're going to have to do that. You're not going to listen to anything I say, but that's fine. We all have to do that. And I'm still going to do that many times in my life over because I don't know it all, but I know this.
Yeah.
I would also say something I learned, as a director, you're always wrong. When there is a conflict, when there is a breakdown in communication, it's your fault. Always your fault. No matter how bad the other person is, no matter how much they don't get it, no matter how much they don't get you, however much they don't understand what you're going through, it's still your fault. It's your responsibility to manage and make sure everyone is happy.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're the director. Period.
Yeah.
No matter how shitty everyone is, it's still always your fault.
I love that. I'm so glad you talked about like how your actors were kind of playing themselves. That's such a similar thing to what I just did and am currently, I guess, doing with this short that I had this in post-production. It's about a family dealing with Alzheimer's and how that can rip apart a family, but also bring it together. And it's like almost autobiographical with my own experience. But my lead actor, we had so many conversations about like our shared experience of dealing with our grandparents and all that kind of stuff. And it was just so like, we almost had the same experience. Like we started knowing all these similarities. Like I have a family member named a name that he has a family member with the same name. Like it's just, we were so in tune with each other that it just made the whole process that much easier and so much better. So I love that.
That's interesting.
I've got one more question for you, and I want to lead into it with this quote from your EPK. It's a quote from you, so apologies for reading your own words back to you. I'll try to do it justice. But you said, "My own belief is that people don't watch films to escape, but in the hopes of seeing their secret struggles given a voice, of seeing languages used not to lie, but to reveal the truth. Isn't that the dream of cinema?" I'm curious.
Yeah, and that references back to the opening quote of Fincher's quote saying that people invented language to lie to each other.
Yeah, exactly. This film, I think fully deservedly so, has had a great festival process. It's been picked up by Utopia, which is a great company. Whenever this episode is coming out, it'll be able to be seen by people. What do you hope people get from this experience? Like in that cathartic, almost therapeutic sense of seeing their secret struggles on screen. What's your biggest hope for the audience?
I may be overstating my own experience, but like I don't go into a movie to escape. I go to see a miracle happen. Like I want to feel, I look like for guidance, how to live, how to be, and to feel less alone. when you see something you're going through, like in art or in someone else, like in a connection, in a relationship, what happens? You make a connect, you feel less alone. You feel a little bit safer to say like, oh, I'm going through this, and you know what? It's okay. I'm not the only one going through this. Like that's we spend a lot of our lives online, most of our lives online, and most of how we talk about how we present in the world, we clean up nice in the physical space. Well, how do we present ourselves in digital space? We're always presenting our best lives. Anybody who's alive, who's being honest, knows they're not always living their best life. From so the space to feel less alone in like being able to say, well, you know what, like I don't feel that great, and here's why. Like that is shrinking. So I mean, increasingly you have like an almost performative aspect in digital space where you could talk about your vulnerabilities, but like
it's still not honest
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I think when we see art that like really touches us, we're talking about art that like really isn't, it's not dressed up, it's not selling us something. It's just like, okay, yeah, this feels true. This feels real. So and when we experience that, we feel a little bit less alone, and we feel like we've had like safer to move forward and heal, whatever, grow, address, confront. So I think, not to be all highfalutin about it, but that's what I look for when I go. I don't think I'm alone in looking for that. Yeah, and I think when we see that and we recognize that in people who strangers on a screen who don't necessarily come from the same place we do, maybe that creates a little bit more empathy, because right now there's not, I mean, we could use a little more of that. We're not saving the world here, but like just because we're not saving the world doesn't mean we can't aspire to that. And I don't mean this literally, but like, okay, there's no objectivity in journalism, right? But when you have an outlet or publication that isn't aspiring to objectivity, well, that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So like, just because there is no objectivity, just because there is no objective truth, just because we're not saving the world, like when people stop aspiring to those things, that traditionally you would hope they would, well, then we have a problem.
Yeah, for sure.
And so like, whether we can actually help create more empathy in the world, but if we're not aspiring to it, I don't know.
I love that. No, I love that. I think I could not agree more. And I think, like I said, I'm lucky to get to see this a little bit early than it's released, but I think it aligns with that perfectly. Mm-hmm. Like it made me feel less alone, and it gave me a new perspective on things. So, I thank you for making it. I truly enjoyed it.
Appreciate that.
And it's so deserving of all its success, and I can't wait for other people to see it. I'm just giddy to tell everyone I know to watch it. And congrats on distribution and everything. Thank you. I think my dog got in my room. But it's just, I love it. So congratulations, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. This has been fun. Yeah.
Thanks for reaching out. Good talking to you.
Of course. All right, y'all. Episodes come out every Monday. We've been a little sporadic because I'm planning a lot of upgrades to the podcast, but links in the description to all of David's work. Check out his website, check out Materna, and I think everyone will love it. Thank you again, David. This has been fun.